Welcome to Know Before You Go for the sixth Sunday in Ordinary Time. My name is Father Brendan Curran, Dominican promoter for justice and peace. Choices, choices, choices. Make the right choice and lean on the Spirit of God. Now, this happens to be Super Bowl Sunday. And perhaps when we think about choices, we may think about the someone might think about we're thinking about which team we're rooting for. You rooting for Kansas City or Philadelphia? Mahomes or the city of brotherly love? Well, uh, so much importance to a football game. But perhaps what it reminds us is a theme that does go throughout all of the readings of our scriptures this Sunday. Each and every one of them, even the Psalms today, remind us of the choice of people in faith to lean on the great gifts we've been given, individually and collectively, of living our lives in the Spirit, putting that faith into action, not just the words. In other words, not just talking the talk, but walking the walk of the practice of faith. Now let's dive in. But first, let's recognize that choices are so important to us. Choices in this thread of readings remind us, especially in a world in challenges and struggles, who is not disturbed, dismayed by the nearly apocalyptic vision of pictures and videos coming from northern Syria and southern Turkey in the area of destruction of the earthquakes. Well over 21,000 people dead now, remind us that at every hour forward, there are choices that we will make for first responders and help across the world to help truly save lives. Choices, choices. The first reading from the book of Sirach. How appropriate. One of the collection of the wisdom scriptures of the Hebrew scriptures. We hear from that first reading 3 times the words, if you choose, if you choose. If you choose, the first beginning says, you can keep the commandments and they will save you. If you choose, if you choose. The eyes of God are on those who fear him. Making choices is a reminded theme throughout that first reading from the book of Sirach. And then we go into even the responsorial psalm. Mindful in the responsorial psalm, Psalm 119, we hear this reflection, we hear this reminder to us. Blessed are they who follow the law of the Lord. Blessed are they whose way is blameless, who walk in the law of the Lord, they who observe his decrees, who seek him with all their heart, with all their heart. Blessed are they. Give me discernment, O God, that I may observe your law. Help us to make the right choices. Another sign of reassurances, not just for the big world conflicts or challenges we deal with, but our own personal lives. And that reminds us, going into the second reading, a reading from the first letter of Paul to the Corinthians, we remember that St. Paul calls to each of the followers, we do not speak of the wisdom of this world, but of a new age, reminding and reassuring those new early Christians that the fears and the dangers that they lean into to share their experience of their faith in the risen Christ come with its own perils, challenges, and risks, but be reassured, he writes to each of them. What eye has not seen and ear has not heard, what God has prepared for those who love him. For putting our faith in action will come with its own rich rewards God promises to each of us. Paul to the Corinthians reminds us again of the choices those early Christians were making and inviting to each of us, near and far, of the dear and important choices we make with one another. And then we go to the end of the reading of the gospel today. We remember that it comes in a kind of third segment of this portion of the scriptures of the Gospel of Matthew 2 Sundays ago. We remember that 2 weeks ago, the experience of the Beatitudes. Blessed are they who mourn. Blessed are they who suffer. Blessed are they who suffer for having professed my name. For yours is the kingdom of God. For yours you will be blessed. For yours, God promises us that we will be renowned, that we will be restored, that God will provide a place for us one day. We are reminded in this gospel story, once again, another section that follows it beyond the Beatitudes. Then last Sunday, we remember to not just light a lamp and place it underneath the table. That's not what our lives of faith are all about, but to place them on top of the lampstands so that all might see the life of hope and the light for all to see. That's what the gospel speaks to today. That's what the challenges speak to in the context of this gospel. Now, there's a long gospel story this Sunday, so hang in there. It may feel like it's a lot of do's and don'ts, but let us remember that Jesus gives a series of, you hear them say, you have heard it was said, you shall not commit adultery. You have heard it said, you shall not kill. You have heard it said, you shall not divorce. But I say, Jesus is reminding them of a new commandment that we have been gifted with the Spirit. Jesus was giving them practical examples of how to put flesh on the last 2 Sundays' lessons. First, from the Beatitudes, blessed are they who are mourning or suffer because of me. And then a call to action. Place your light of your faith on a lampstand so that all may see. And now Jesus says, yeah, but you need to have prudence. You need to be prudent about the fact that, yes, lying will get you into trouble. There will be consequences from your actions. Yes, even the serious nature of adultery and other hardships against the commandments have their own consequences. That's the context of reading the gospel story this week. It's a bit long, but hang in there. Recognizing and reading into it the context of all of these readings today will remind us it's all about choices. Yeah, in a silly way, it may kind of be like a football game, like the Super Bowl. Now, it's not about the wins or losses of the Super Bowl, but it's a reminder to each of us that our lives are full with choices with their own consequences. And leaning on the faith and the experience of God, let us remember that each of these consequences have their ramifications. And let us remember that in this gospel story, in reading this series of invitations of Christ, but I say, a new law is written in your hearts. Let it be written in your hearts. Let us recognize the love of God, that the Spirit is in each of us, that St. Paul in the second reading reminds us that we have been gifted with the story of new life in the resurrection, that we are to be bearers of that new life for all to see, not just for those who belong, as Jesus castigates and criticizes in the gospel, not just for those who follow the form of the law, like the Pharisees and Sadducees, those who follow the right rules of the law, are lost in the sense of the spirit of the law. That's what we hear in each of the readings spoken to today, from the spirit of Sirach, from those wisdom scriptures of the Hebrew scriptures, and again from the gospel, where Jesus reminds us, don't follow the letter of the law, we might paraphrase and remember to say, but to live the spirit of the law in your hearts, that you are the temples of spirit, as St. Paul teaches us, and that we are to be putting our faith into action. Let us remember those works by the example of how others see. This Sunday really gets to understand and appreciate the Beatitudes, or to understand and appreciate the light of Christ that we are to share with others, come by how others can see the Beatitudes in us, by seeing the example the Beatitudes walk and talk and have their living and being, and examples by our action. That's what we're called to be. That's what St. Paul in the second reading challenges those early followers. And that's what Jesus invites those followers of Christ to be in the gospel today. So in this sixth Sunday of ordinary time, in this time of seeing some difficulties in our local communities and beyond, even in the destructions of the crumbling situation in Syria and Turkey, let us remember that we are called to lift up that light of Christ for others by letting people see our Beatitudes by our actions. They will see and bear the fruit of our example. Let us bear that light of Christ for others. Let's be that beacon of hope. Let us share that word of hope for the world today. Blessings to you.